Hello and welcome to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Addeo, a social media marketing expert specific to the wedding industry. On this show, I discuss tips to help you DIY your social media, as well as getting the confidence and income to outsource it. Thank you for allowing this episode to come through on your Bluetooth, your car radio, wherever it may be you're listening from today. Now, let's take your wedding business to the next level. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am recording this on a dreary September afternoon. It's raining outside. I've got laundry going. I finished up some calls for the day, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good. I have been running my business for a when you look in the big picture, it's been a short amount of time. So I've been running I Do Wedding Marketing for around 3 years now. And gosh, what a baby, right? It's such in the early processes of a business. But going from someone who never ran their own business before to someone who did, I really needed to nurture myself a lot. And I did that by pretty much listening to podcasts all day while I was working my other job. I took an admin job with the intention of wanting a boring job so I could kind of be on autopilot there, listen to these podcasts, and then at home, I would still have all my creative energy stored up to apply towards I Do Wedding Marketing. So today I wanted to share the 5 podcasts that really fueled me when I started my business. I would not start a business without listening to these podcast series regularly. Before I let you know my 5 podcasts, I do want to remind you that the Engage to Engagement workshop is happening live September 14th. You can get your ticket now for $47. And myself and Carissa Cruzy Weddings will be teaching you to go from an engaged couple on your feed to you engaging with them in 10 minutes a day. So in 10 minutes a day, you'll learn my signature 10-10-10 strategy for organic engagement, as well as Carissa's content that converts strategy. So if you want to learn more about that, I will have it linked in the show notes. But for now, let me tell you about some of these podcasts. And the first one I want to talk about is pretty obvious why it's inspiring by the title, but there's so much more to it. It's called Side Hustle School, hosted by Chris Guillebeau. And a full circle moment for me is that my business was featured on an episode of Side Hustle School. So I will link that in the show notes, as well as all of the podcasts I mentioned. And what's great about Side Hustle School is that it's short form content. So it's designed to have an episode every day. And yes, I said every day. This isn't something he's just doing for 30 days and then that's it, like I am doing an episode daily for 30 days. He does an episode every day. And he's been doing it for years. So every day I would get a success story. And sometimes they would stay as side hustles. Sometimes they would go to bigger businesses and go full time. Whatever it was, I was hearing a success story every day and going into how they built it. And that was really motivating and inspiring for me. And I was able to get such a variety of businesses because you're not only on Side Hustle School, they weren't only looking to talk to people who were of huge success. It was people who just had a successful side hustle, like myself. All you had to do was have a side hustle that was successful. So that could be as simple as selling candles on Etsy to as successful as being able to see your product in chain stores. There's such a variety of what success means in Side Hustle School. So that is something I really recommend to listen to if you're looking for ideas, if you're looking for inspiration, if you like short form content, and if you like it daily. If you need a daily dose, Side Hustle School. The next podcast that I listen to regularly when starting my business is called So Money with Farnoosh Torabi. I still listen to So Money, and So Money has 3 episodes a week. I believe she still does. And they vary to interviews as well as Farnoosh answering questions and tackling topics. Farnoosh is very approachable. I have messaged her when I've had questions before, and she's fantastic. But why this was so important to me establishing a business was she covers a lot of questions about finances, taxes, IRAs, investments, everything. Because she records so frequently and does weekly Q&A episodes, you really get things that are happening in real time. So the relevancy is fantastic. And if you're somebody where you feel that money and finances, or maybe understanding the next layer of finances, isn't your strong suit, then Farnoosh has so much content, so many questions, and the gift of giving the answers. The answers she gives are so clear and easy to follow that I feel you will learn a lot from it. But my favorite episodes have always been her interviews. She talks to all sorts of people. In the beginning, you really especially got some unique people who weren't even necessarily someone you'd expect to hear on a money podcast. And today you get the big people in money down to people you haven't heard of yet. So money. So Money by Farnoosh Torabi is a podcast you should be checking out. Now, as I continue, I do want to give, I guess, a disclaimer. You may already be picking up on it, but none of these podcasts that I listened to were wedding related. And that was intentional because I wanted to not be influenced directly by other people talking about weddings. So I would listen to some social media podcasts sporadically and still do. They're not cracking my top five though, but some I listen to are Amy Porterfield's podcast and trying to social media. I think it's, I can't even remember them, but I still do listen to Social Bamboo a lot. That one, if I had to pick a social media podcast to listen to, it would be Social Bamboo. And I listened to that a lot while I was starting out. As far as wedding podcasts go, I do listen to more of them now that I feel more secure and established with my business. But in the beginning, I really didn't want to be influenced by anybody else. So I could be sure that my strategies, my voice, etc., were my own. Now, the next podcast I want to talk about that I listened to build up that business was Glambition Radio with Allie Brown. So, Allie Brown worked with high level earners, specifically females making high six figures or more. So, I loved listening to our podcast to kind of get myself hearing these women's frames of mind. And she has such a multitude of guests. I mean, she has spoken with, I mean, from, gosh, Joan Collins to the woman who invented the squatty potty, all different types of businesses represented. And the thing that they have in common is that they're women run and they are successful. And I loved getting to hear just the full blueprints from these women. She speaks with Orange Theory founder Ellen Latham, so many people, that Birchbox founder, so much. I could just keep rambling, but I found this really got me in the zone of almost like what the success part would look like in the end. They go through how they got there, but just being that person on the podcast talking about the success, that was who I really wanted to align my mindset with. So it was like Side Hustle School was kind of like phase one, and then Glambition would be like when I was mentally at phase two, or more realistically with being a high six figure earner. That's more like phase five, six, seven. But Glambition with Allie Brown will really teach you quite a lot about running a successful business and what it takes to do it. I have two more, but I'm going to lump them together to be to be a wild card. So I'll count them as one, and I will officially add Social Bamboo with Derek Vidal into the rotation in my top five. Even though the fifth one has two, but that's because it's kind of a wild card, as I said. So Social Bamboo is Derek Vidal's podcast. It used to be called Instagram Marketing Secrets, which was how I found it through that search term. And you kind of follow along his journey of doing great larger scale marketing. So if you do e-commerce, product businesses, giveaway content, things like that, his podcast is for you. It isn't as directed towards service-based businesses like myself, but I still learn so much from Derek. And that's why I like listening to someone that maybe wasn't in my niche, because I could take his ideas and apply it in a really original way to myself. So he talks about all sorts of marketing now, from email marketing, TikTok, Instagram, sales, a lot. And I got to work with Derek for the first time after listening to his podcast for years. And it was a really nice experience. He's really willing to help people, especially his listeners. So I recommend you become one. You can check it out at Social Bamboo. I'll have him linked below as well. And now let's get to my wild cards. And that's because sometimes you need a break. And even through my breaks on these podcasts, I was able to learn a lot. These two podcasts are part of my favorite things. One is the Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill and Len Testa, and the other is Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. And these are both podcasts kind of based on history. One is the history of Disney. Two is the history of wrestling, specifically told through Bruce Pritchard's experience in the industry. And when you are getting the history of Disney, you're really learning how a huge corporation came to be. You're learning their struggles, their highs, things they tried that didn't work. And you'd be surprised how it can motivate you and inspire you on a much smaller scale in your own business. And as I would hear stories of Walt Disney, and then I'd hear stories on Something to Wrestle, Vince McMahon. There's so many parallels. It's crazy. So even if it's not strictly a business podcast, you still can learn by listening to how something you love came to be. Now on the Disney Dish podcast, they do have the first half of the show dedicated to current news, then the second half is dedicated to history, and on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, the structure has changed a bit, where we're not really getting as many frequent, shorter form new episodes, but rather a lot of big episodes featuring past content. But hopefully that will change for either of those podcasts. If you check them out, I recommend you check out the earlier episodes. But really, what I'm suggesting when I recommend these podcasts is that you take something that you're interested in and allow your mind to hear that. So I also listen to the I Know Dino podcast because I like dinosaurs. I listen to true crime podcasts. So what's something that you're interested in that you could start listening to, and it will either help give your mind a break or maybe you'll learn from it too. So I invite you to explore that.